week Parshas Naso. We had to wait 2 weeks to get to this week's Parsha because Shavuos was on a Shabbos.
And
Although
uh,
in
Israel.
Israel we are a week different because since Shavuos was on Friday and Shabbos, so they only had one day in Israel. So Shabbos last week was a regular Shabbos in Israel, and they read Parshas Naso last week. So for the next number of weeks, we are going to be on different weeks. We're going to be reading a different parsha here outside of Israel than in Israel. So that's just it happens every few years. So we are one of the main aspects of this week's parsha is the laws of a nazir. A nazir is an individual who pledged, made a vow that he was going to refrain, or it could be a she, refrain from having wine or any, which also means any grape product for at least 30 days. They can vow it for whatever amount of time they want. And once a person becomes a Nazir, there are a couple of other laws that apply that are specific to a Nazir. One is that he also cannot cut his hair. And also, they cannot become tameh. They cannot become in touch with a dead body, even a family member, which is, of course, much more stringent than a regular Kohen, because a regular Kohen is permitted to become tameh and not, in fact, is required to become tameh to immediate family member. However, a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to become tameh even to a family member. So the Nazir is really, in a way, similar in this regard to a Kohen Gadol. Just a Nazir is also referred to in the Torah as someone who's kadosh, someone who's holy. So there's something special about this Nazir who made this pledge that he's not going to have wine or a grape product for 30 days or more, but let's say 30 days, even if it's just for 30 days. And then during that time, he won't cut his hair and he won't become tameh, which sounds like maybe not such a complicated thing. I mean, many of us don't take a haircut for 30 days. Many of us might not drink wine for 30 days. A little bit hard on Shabbos not to have grape juice, but someone else can make kiddush for you if you wanted to. Doesn't seem to be such a onerous activity to become a Nazir for that minimum period. It's one thing you'd be someone like Shimshon or Shmuel Hanavi who did it for their entire lives, but for a small period of time, it's not such a big deal. Yet we find that the Nazir is referred to as someone who's kadosh, someone who's holy. And in a way, he's compared to the Kohen Gadol in that sense also. In fact, the term that is used is haziro, from the word nazer, which means to crown. It's like there's something special about him. He's got this crown on his head from this activity that he is refraining from the wine. So what is this? What is this idea? So the concept is that this Nazir, by choosing to refrain from the wine, even though it's a small thing, is showing that he's in control. What he's trying to do is, in Nazir, first of all, the goal of a Nazir is for a person to elevate themselves and to become closer to Hashem. That's why a person becomes a Nazir, because they want to become closer to Hashem. And the way that person is able to do it is by taking a small thing, such as not having wine, and saying, I am going to be in control. Because normally, the way we as human beings, right, we have a lot of interests and desires, and we want things, and we go for what we want. And even though, yes, there are many laws about things that we have to control ourselves on, but there's lots of things that we're permitted to do within the Torah, some of which we could overindulge if we're not careful, but it's still permitted. And by this person exerting this control, what he's doing is he's saying that when I decide to do something or not do something, I'm making a choice and I am in control of my choices. And therefore, when I choose to do a mitzvah, it's because I chose to do so, not because I just happened to be doing it. And that's how a person is becoming closer to Hashem. They're becoming closer by doing it because Hashem said so, not just because I decided I like this activity. So even when we do a mitzvah, right, it's not just that, I happen to like Shabbos, especially, good meals and challah and all that stuff. That's great. Or other things that I like to do that happen to be a mitzvah. That's very nice. But if that's the reason you're doing it, you're not really showing that you're doing it for Hashem. So if I'm making the choice, a conscious choice, then I'm doing it for that. And that's what a Nazir is able to accomplish, is that he is creating himself within himself this self-control to be able to say, I am making conscious choices, and what I am doing is because I have decided that I want to do what Hashem says, or I mean, I've decided that, but essentially I am not going to do something because that's what Hashem told me, not because I don't want to. And what ends up happening is that when we look at the laws of the Nazir, then we see that he is prohibited from becoming tamei to any of the family members, even a close family, yet a Kohen is permitted. So we ask ourselves the question, what's the difference between the Kohen and the Nazir within this regard? And here it is because the Kohen became a Kohen naturally. And a person only becomes a Kohen because of their heritage, right? If your father was a Kohen, you're a Kohen. If your father was not a Kohen, you can never become a Kohen. That's the only one who could be that was Aaron HaKohen, right? The original Kohen when Hashem appointed him. But other than that, a person does not become a Kohen, and therefore the the choice to become a Kohen was not theirs, and so it therefore makes sense that all of their special status of being a Kohen, if you want to call it holy, the holiness of being a Kohen, is coming not from their personal choice, but is coming from their heritage, and therefore to become tamei to someone who's in their family, immediate family member, as part of that immediate heritage, makes sense. But the Nazir is a person who made a choice on his own to become holy. He decided to elevate his status. He's the one who's making this conscious decision to control the behavior and dedicate himself, because the reason he's doing it is to dedicate himself that he wants to become closer to Hashem, and therefore he is elevating his status. He is doing that in a thing which is independent of his family. In fact, in a sense, he's elevating himself above the status of the rest of his family because they're not considered Kodesh in that regard. They're not considered specifically holy with regard to being a Nazir. And therefore, it's not appropriate for him to become Tamei to them because now he's on that elevated level in a certain way, similarly to the Kohen Gadol, who is different than everybody else in terms of his elevated status. And so the message of the Nazir is to teach us that even if you don't become a Nazir, which obviously doesn't apply nowadays, but that we do have that ability to elevate our own status by making our actions through choice, by saying we are going to control ourselves, we are going to choose to do or not to do because that is what Hashem says to do, not because I've decided that I like this or I don't like this. And when we do that, we are actually able to elevate ourselves and we are able to say, we're not just special people because our parents were and our grandparents were, and going all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jewish people at Sinai, which is, we do have that inherent heritage and we do have that inherent specialness, yet we still are able to elevate ourselves on a different level to make it that it's because of our own personal choices and how we have decided that we are going to commit ourselves and be able to, in that way, to come closer to Hashem through making specific choices on all of our activities and deciding, I am doing this because that's what Hashem wants me to do.